Welcome back. Primary election results are finally in, and the city has been keeping us informed all along the way. Joining us now to share New York City and Bronx results and what to expect in this upcoming general election on November 2nd are Claudia Irizarry Aponte, Bronx Reporter, and Allison Dikanovic, engagement reporter from the city. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. So first, I just want to quickly shine a light on the incredible election coverage at the city and all the wonderful tools, surveys, and resources you all shared throughout this pretty hectic election season. So thank you for that. You know, I love Meet Your Mayor, and I love collaborating with the city at Bronx for Voter Fest. It was so fun. Can you share how the city kept New Yorkers informed leading up to the primaries and how that went for you all?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So we really wanted to make sure that our coverage was making it easier for voters to navigate such an overwhelming and important election. So we started by asking readers what questions they had about the election months leading up. So we had heard from about over 6,000 New Yorkers about what questions they had, things that they were confused about, things they wanted to know about the voting process, the candidates, that kind of thing. And we used what we were hearing from readers to write newsletters and explainers and to create tools like Meet Your Mayor to help voters figure out how to participate. And then also as an effort to try to really engage and include as many voters as possible, we partnered with amazing organizations like BronxNet and others to host a series of outdoor events throughout June to bring voting information directly to neighborhoods.
Thank you so much for that, Allison. I thought it was incredible work. I definitely, leveraged some of those tools you shared at the city before I went into the ballots, into the poll site. So thank you for that. So going into the election results, Brooklyn BP Eric Adams won the Democratic nominee for mayor, as we know, and Bronx Councilmember Vanessa Gibson won for borough president. Can you share more about the primary election results in New York City and here in Bronx?
Yeah, absolutely. Vanessa Gibson won pretty decisively in the Bronx Borough President election. She had a pretty strong showing on election night and continued to hold her lead throughout all the rounds of ranked choice voting. And once the absentee ballots came in, I think this is pretty much due to the fact that, that she, as a candidate, really prioritized being out, on the beat, talking to voters and, sharing masks, and distributing food and just doing all these things that really show that she's out in the district at her election victory watch party on election night. I spoke with someone who was a volunteer in her campaign, and she said it was the very first time she had ever volunteered for any campaign ever. And she did it because, Vanessa Gibson had helped her, her school. She was a PTA mom, secure food and masks and supplies to the kids at her school and her own children. And that's clearly, that strategy really translated to vote. Vanessa Gibson now the first woman to lead the borough presidency of the Bronx, the first non-Latino of any gender to be Bronx borough president in close to 30, 40 years. Clearly, a big change in the Bronx. And personally, I think that her engagement with the community, really helped her secure victory last month.
A historical nomination indeed. Thanks for sharing, Claudia. And Vanessa Gibson is no stranger to our show. She's a regular here, so I can concur that she's really active in the community. Thanks for sharing. So, Allison, the primary took place on June 22nd, and these results didn't come in until an entire month later, and that's something the city shared via newsletters and also articles. What exactly took so long, and what happened at the Board of Elections?
Yeah, thanks, Sonyi. It was a little bit of a confusing process, but actually a lot of the delay in the timeline for counting votes was expected and just something that maybe voters weren't as prepared for. But because this year with the pandemic, anyone could vote absentee in New York, so there were a lot more people who requested to vote by mail and to vote absentee, and enough people who chose to vote that way that those numbers could really impact the election results. So what happens in New York is there's a waiting period of time when there's a certain length of time that absentee ballots have to get to the Board of Elections after Election Day. It's a week, and then after that point, if someone made some kind of minor error on their ballot or something like that, they forgot to sign the envelope, there's another period of time where they can correct their ballot and send it back. So all those different like protections put in to make sure that every vote is counted takes a number of weeks. And so there was kind of this holdup of when the absentee ballots would get to be added to the total, which could impact the final numbers. And so that was later. But what had happened that was confusing, that really threw a lot of voters, was the Board of Elections decided to release like partial results early. And so they were unofficial results that didn't have all of the ballots, like all of the absentee ballots counted. They just were like the ballots that had been counted so far. And when they released those results, they made an error where they accidentally counted a bunch, like over 130,000 ballots that were test ballots. So they had to correct the results. And so it was basically like needing to correct the results and having unofficial results before the official results. That just was a little bit confusing to people. But the length of time itself was really protections that were put in to make sure that every ballot was counted.
Oh, that is definitely a big fumble. Thanks for sharing, Allison. So I wonder, did ranked choice voting factor into that extensive count as well? I know the city spoke with experts about whether it worked well here in New York. What did you find? How did RCB fare up this primary election?
Yeah, so as far as the results, ranked choice voting affected that because in order to win in a ranked choice voting election, you need to get at least 50% of the votes. And that's tallied through the rounds that they run with the ranked choice. So usually in a normal election without ranked choice voting, on election night, with the unofficial results, you can get an idea of who won because they don't need to have the majority. It's just like who had the most votes. But in a ranked choice election, it needs to be who gets to 50%. And that's harder to calculate until you have all of the votes. So that's why the ranked choice voting made it harder to tell who won on election night. But as far as how ranked choice voting went, a lot of voters seemed to really like it. There was a survey that they did, and it was like nearly 80% of voters said they understood ranked choice voting really well. 95% of voters said they found their ballot simple to complete. And voter turnout increased throughout the city by almost 30%. And so that shows that there were people who were concerned that ranked choice voting would make it too confusing and would prevent people from voting, which maybe happened for some people, but overall the numbers don't really show that.
Well, that's awesome news. Thanks for sharing that as well. I know a lot of people had these nerves worked up until
Totally.
the primary election when it came to RCB, but all that outreach that was going on and all that, all the education we received before the primary really helped a lot of folks try to kind of hone down on what ranked choice voting really was and how it worked. So Claudia, it's not over yet, is it? We have an upcoming general election on November 2nd. Can you share more about this upcoming race and what the biggest contested races are that we should look out for?
Of course. In terms of the general election in November, when Democrats will face Republicans on the general election ballot. In terms of local races in the Bronx, there's less to look at. I mean, we're talking about the Bronx as the bluest, i.e. the most Democratic county in the entire country. So not really a hotbed for competitive general election races, as we see in some parts of Queens specifically, and of course in Staten Island. But of course there is the mayoral election to look forward to when Democrat Eric Adams will face Republican Curtis Sliwa, co-founder of the Guardian Angels. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on in terms of November. But I think that we can expect if pretty much all of the Democratic nominees for city council and other local races for borough president to be elected in November and to serve starting in January.
Gotcha. Thank you. So we also do have important ballot measures to vote on, including redistricting and the environment and more. First, can you help us define what exactly ballot measures are and share what some of those questions that we should expect on the back of our ballot?
Yeah, so ballot measures are something that the state legislature can choose to put on the ballot, and basically it's giving voters a chance to have a say in making a change to the state's constitution. So there's certain changes that the legislature can't make on their own because it's written into New York's constitution. And so a ballot measure gives voters the chance to say, like, yes, we want the state to be able to make this change. So one example of that is having same-day voter registration. So right now, New Yorkers can't register to vote on the same day of an election, and our leaders in Albany can't make that change just by passing a law. That has to be a change in the Constitution. So one of the ballot measures that voters will get to vote on in November is saying, like, yes, we want the legislature to have permission to put in same-day registration, or no, we don't think that they should. Another ballot measure that voters get to weigh in on is a right to a clean environment. So that would be putting a change in the state's constitution to say that all New Yorkers have a right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. And I think that the changes that would lead to are still unknown, but it would make it like an official part of New York's constitution that is something that the state is promising all of its residents.
Wow. I mean, these sound like game changers, and we have the power of our votes to make these changes happen come November 2nd. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Before we go, how can we stay in the know with the city? Please provide any social media, websites, etc.
Yeah, totally. You can find us on our website. It's thecity.nyc. And then on social, so on Twitter and on Instagram especially, we are at thecityny.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison and Claudia from the city, for joining us today and sharing more about New York City and Bronx election results.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, we're taking a quick break here on Open BXRX Tuesday. We'll be right back.